Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today I'm here to talk about Elvis's final album, Moody Blue. So I've been thinking for a while that I want to do an Elvis video because Elvis was the first, non-children's singer that I really got into. I remember, growing up listening to Elvis's Christmas album, really liking the kitschiness of Santa Bring My Baby Back to Me, finding his voice beautiful on Silver Bells. And because I wasn't the kind of kid who listened to the radio or watched MTV or anything, when it came time to picking a favorite musician, it wasn't as natural a thing to me to do. So I decided, well, Elvis is the most famous rock musician. He's the king of rock and roll. And so as a kid, I fell in love with Elvis. And in subsequent years, I've maybe had a bit less time for Elvis because, well, basically he wasn't a songwriter, and it's easier to identify with singers who also write their own songs because you could say, oh, there's real meaning in what they're saying. There's a real expression of identity. There's no denying that Elvis was an amazing performer, and I very much like coming back to his music and his beautiful voice from time to time. And now that I've been going through the process of systematically listening to classic albums, last year I listened to every Beatles album and every Stones album. This year I'm hoping to listen to every Bob Dylan album, possibly every Neil Young album. I figured, well, it would be nice to talk about an actual Elvis album and not just the greatest hits collections and the Christmas album I grew up with as a kid. Now, I looked into Elvis albums and I realized it doesn't make sense because, again, Elvis not being a songwriter, there's not going to be an Elvis project that's equivalent to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He was under contract, basically to put out as much content as possible for Colonel Tom Parker and his business people. They wanted, 2 albums a year and the movies and the live shows. And it was largely just about, getting as much Elvis out to the presses as possible. So lots of his albums are just, soundtracks for movies or live albums. They weren't artistic concepts in the same way that, a Beatles album or a Bob Dylan album would be. I've always liked the design of this last one. The fact that it was called Moody Blue, it was originally released on a promotional blue colored vinyl record. It feels like maybe there's just a bit of a concept going on with this one. And since this was the last album of new Elvis material published in his lifetime, I decided to give it a spin. So we're going to start with track number 2. It's called If You Love Me. This one, it has Elvis's big booming voice. This is a song, despite being country, written by an English guy named John Rostill and then famously recorded by Olivia Newton-John. Giving that one a quick listen, I think Elvis's version sounds kind of similar, so just some over-the-top country. Track number 3 is Little Darling. This song was originally by Morris Williams of the Zodiacs. It's a kind of a doo-wop song, but it's not a straight doo-wop song. The piano glissandos sound kind of space-agey, as does Elvis's use of falsetto. Track number 4 is called He'll Have to Go. This is crooning country recorded originally by The Gentleman, Jim Reeves, another important early influence on Elvis. This is a song where I don't think Elvis's big voice necessarily works that well. For example, there's a part that goes, put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. Let's pretend that we're together all alone. And I'll tell the man to turn the jukebox way down low. And you can tell your friend there with you, he'll have to go. So this feels like something that's supposed to be delivered softly and sadly, not in a belted, over-the-top Las Vegas kind of voice. And for whatever reason, even though Elvis had this huge vocal range, and one wouldn't necessarily think of his oldest recordings as being recorded in this campy, booming, deeper voice, later in his career, and certainly by this last album, that's the only sound you're going to get. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that well. So I was listening to this album on CD, and so it doesn't include track 5 from the original record, which was another song written by John Rostill and recorded by Olivia Newton-John. The reason it didn't come out on the CD is because the CD was released, I think, as part of a CD box set, and there was a live album in that box set that also included that song, so there was no point. Track number 6 is called Way Down. This is a different kind of sound again. It has a bassy synth and backup singers creating a feel to Elvis's earlier recording, rubbernecking. And it also has a bit of a kitschy gospel sound to it, especially when Elvis sings way down. But, it's fun Elvis kitsch. Track number 7 is called Pledging My Love. It's a soft-spoken blues ballad first recorded by Johnny Ace, who you may know from being immortalized in that Paul Simon song, the late, great Johnny Ace. Track number 8 is the title track, Moody Blue. So this song was written by Mark James, who was the same man behind another huge Elvis hit, Suspicious Mind. The sounds on this one, it just booms with Las Vegas era Elvis. And the instrumentation also a little reminiscent of his song, Viva Las Vegas. That said, I think this is one of the songs where the kitschiness works the best because it's just so lively. And I think this lyric was really compelling. Well, it's hard to be a gambler, betting on the number that changes every time while you think you're going to win. So in other words, as I said, Elvis was someone who was just putting out a lot of product. And, sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it's just going to be meh. Elvis, you have a nice voice, but this song doesn't have any feel to it. So, putting out a lot of songs for Elvis, certainly in much of the later part of his career, just felt like a gamble. Maybe this will work. Maybe this won't, whatever. I just have to put something out here. And Moody Blue, it sits right on the line. It's kind of kitschy, but it's an interesting kitschy. It's not a song you'll soon forget. Track number 9 is called She Thinks I Still Care. This is something a bit subtler, though again, I don't think it works with Elvis's booming voice. It was famously recorded earlier by the country singer George Jones. Track number 10, this is a song by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. And I know I've criticized Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicals before, but it's not because I don't like the music. It's because I think they lack good storytelling. But anyway, I think for Elvis's bigger voice, the sort of Broadway sentiments in a Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice song kind of work well. Saying, "It's easy for you," is a good line to use when you're not getting everything right in your life. And it goes well with Elvis's strong voice because it kind of implies, yeah, you think I'd be great at everything because I'm the king, but no, I'm struggling behind all this big bravado persona. There's a part in the song that goes, "I had a wife and I had children. I threw them all away." This is a recurring theme in Elvis's songs and songs like Don't Cry Daddy and Separate Ways, how devastated he was by failing in his marriage with Priscilla. In short, what do I think of this record? I think Moody Blue is a good track. It's Easy for You is a damn good track. And because they are unique songs to Elvis, I don't think anyone else recorded them before, and I don't think anyone else has recorded a famous song since. They are arguably the biggest highlights of this record. But when it comes to overall best performance, what takes the cake? What actually makes this a solid goodbye album is track number 1, which I forgot to talk about. Elvis opens the album with a version of the song Unchained Melody, which was famously recorded before by the Righteous Brothers. It's a song that sort of has doo-wop style music, but is sung very slowly in a melancholy way. That's the nature of the song. But it works for Elvis because its simplicity allows him to belt without his belting feeling out of place or kitschy. It feels like he's letting out everything in his soul. The song shows his undeniable talent, and not just as a singer. This is a rare song where Elvis is not just holding the microphone or strumming basic chords on the guitar. He's playing piano, and it may not be the most complex piano sound, but he's doing something with trills. So it's a really cool, unique sound. The piano goes well with his big booming voice. It's a really touching performance. Elvis was in really poor health when he was recording this album. They had to kind of fill it in with live material because he just wasn't able or didn't feel up to coming to the studio on certain days. But the fact that even at his weakest, Elvis could do such a powerful recording of this classic song, Unchained Melody, make it its own, that's why it's the gem of Moody Blue. So in short, Moody Blue is not a perfectly conceived goodbye album like, say, David Bowie's Black Star or Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker. And it shouldn't have been. Elvis was only 42 years old when he died. His passing was a slow, sad death march, and not one, as far as I know, that he was intentionally going towards. It just suddenly happened. On top of that, Elvis wasn't the kind of singer to really make albums. As I've said, he was contractually obliged to put out 2 a year. So contrast Elvis with someone like Paul Simon, who really takes his time between projects, but every time he puts out an album, at very least, he's very proud of it. And most of the time, you're going to really like his work too. Elvis is being crowned King of Rock wasn't necessarily praise for him. It was a role he was asked to fulfill. He was asked to be this living golden statue. His life shows that maybe it's best not to have to be the king, to rigidly put out as much music and just be as over the top and singing as possible, but to be the jester or the quartet in the park, to quote American Pie. But despite those constraints, Elvis was undoubtedly a great showman, and with his rendition of Unchained Melody, he proved that he was that showman to the bitter, Moody Blue end. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.